things that worry you or that you think are detrimental institutions or patterns or practices that tend to inhibit the interfaith movement?
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely. And I have a whole sort of section that I might have ended with tonight, but it's an important issue and one that I think is of great concern, certainly of concern to me now. And that is what has happened in the last, I would say, largely over the last 4 years in relation to the increasingly organized hostility to Islam in the United States. Now, it was, because we've studied this in the Pluralism Project, it was the case in the early 90s that there was opposition. There was some local concern when a Muslim school was being built here or an Islamic center was moving into such and such a town. People didn't know. They didn't know who they were. There was a lot of talk about zoning and traffic and would this really be okay. In the last few years, in case you've noticed, it's not about zoning and traffic. It's about Islam. It's about Muslims and Sharia law. It's about, you know, some exaggerated claims of what is happening. And probably the best-known controversy of this was the so-called mosque at Ground Zero, which, well, as we know, was not ever going to be a huge mosque and was not quite at Ground Zero, was really envisioned by Faisal Abdul Rauf as an interfaith center that was housed within an Islamic community center. But this became the target of one of those groups called Stop the Islamization of America. Very well organized, quite well funded, and one that pervade the rhetoric of mosque at Ground Zero, mega mosque, victory mosque, 13-story mosque. I mean, exaggerated notions of what was going to happen there. And as a result, that became the message that made it into not only a national but international controversy. That language was the language that prevailed, and that was also the, you know, how do you compete with Fox News when you're a nonprofit NGO housed somewhere in the upper west side of New York. So these are critical issues, and there's at least 2 organizations that are very much involved with them. One, the Stop the Islamization of America, which largely has roots that are organized around an extremist version of support of Israel. And that is, you know, Robert Spencer, Jihad Watch, and Pamela Geller, who is his sort of public face in many of these, very a blogger in her own right. But those 2 people have had a huge impact in this Stop the Islamization of America. They're linked to Stop the Islamization of Europe, which is located in a number of places. Then there's another group that has largely Christian extremist roots in Texas and elsewhere, and it is called ACT, A-C-T, exclamation point, for America. And the woman who was one of the main sort of leaders there is named Brigitte Gabriel, immigrant from Lebanon. And a lot of that is sort of behind this move in many states that succeeded in Oklahoma last year to put on the ballot initiatives that would prevent the use of Sharia law in the U.S. Well, now, nobody is really proposing Sharia law in the U.S., but it is now on the ballot in some 13 states. And, I mean, there's a whole history behind all of this. But I feel, at this moment in time, this is pretty dangerous, because these people are also setting a wide scope of rhetoric. And in the cases that the Pluralism Project is currently looking at and working on, once you start digging into the substructure of what's going on, these are some of the things that are going on. And it concerns me.
Can you track the money?
The money, yes, has been tracked. And if you look at a document that's on the web called Fear Inc., it is produced by conversations. Among them is a group called the Clarion Fund, which was the group that financed the placement in one's Sunday papers in the election of 2008 of this video called Obsession that was about this. It was about the extremist Islamic takeover of the U.S. and the dangers of extremist Islam generally. Starts out by talking about how most Muslims are not like that, but pretty soon the whole thing falls into a very general, frightening video about Islam. And I guess part of what one has to put into the mix here is that much of this has happened since the election of Barack Obama. So there is, a kind of, why is it now that in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Temecula, California, and various places, there are people who are going to bat to hold up those signs that say Sharia on all dripping with blood, and to say this is dangerous coming to our communities. And I will say, on the other side of this, that those groups are the one sort of coalition that stands on the other side of the street when they're protesting in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, are interfaith groups. Not very vocal, not with, all of the glossy signage that comes from the national movement, but local interfaith groups that are saying, no, this isn't right, and this isn't who these neighbors are. So don't import your vindictive attitudes into our town. But this is really important.